After working with hundreds of retirees, I've noticed how many treat their 401k like a museum, valuable but untouchable. Even with seven figures saved, fear, not money, paralyzes them. So today I'm showing you the five hidden fears stopping retirees from spending confidently and how you can break free of them starting today. The first barrier I see keeping people from using their 401k wisely is what I call market volatility paralysis, where the fear of market losses creates such worry that any withdrawal feels like a disaster. And what's fascinating about this fear is that research in behavioral finance shows that the pain of losses is felt twice as powerfully as the pleasure of equal gains. When you're watching your account balance go up and down, sometimes by five or six figures in a single day, your brain triggers that same threat response that our ancestors felt when facing physical danger. Our modern brains formed roughly 200,000 years ago, but money has existed for around 4,000 years. And as far as the stock market goes, the Dutch East India Company was the first to issue shares of stock in 1602. Our brains are still quite primitive when it comes to these abstract concepts, and watching numbers that represent your life's work fluctuate on a daily basis creates a stress response that's much harder to think through rationally than it sounds. This fear creates what I call the retirement paradox. The very asset designed to provide retirement security becomes a source of constant worry instead. So, why does this fear hurt financial security that it's supposed to protect? First, it leads to some terrible timing decisions, such as selling out during market drops or refusing to take any withdrawals except for the absolute bare necessities. Second, this worry pushes people toward overly safe investments that actually increase the risk of running out of money. For example, at just 3% inflation, our dollars lose half of their purchasing power in 24 years, and retirement often lasts 25 to 30 years. The irony is that even when people make the right financial decisions, without a confident plan, the emotional drain of market worry reduces market happiness regardless of their actual financial reality. There are people who are wealthy on paper, but unfortunately miserable in practice. And this fear based approach turns what should be a retirement resource into constant stress, which helps explain why 63% of Americans fear running out of money more than death itself. But when you build a plan that protects against these market swings, you don't just protect your money, you protect your peace of mind. I see clients stop checking their balance with dread, instead start living each day with confidence. Now, market fear creates serious decision paralysis, but the withdrawal timing anxiety reveals an even deeper barrier that keeps people from confidently using their 401k. This is where uncertainty about safe withdrawal strategies creates paralysis analysis, even among those with substantial savings. You've heard conflicting expert advice around the 4% rule versus dynamic strategies versus bucket approaches. And even recent research from Morningstar shows that the safe withdrawal rate estimates are bouncing from 3.3 to 4% to 3.7% in just the past few years, leaving retirees scratch their heads about what's actually safe. This creates problems because the fear of making an irreversible withdrawal mistake leads to extreme caution or even total avoidance. And this uncertainty creates a retirement where theoretical wealth never actually turns into actual life improvement. I had a client, I'll call her Susan, who had nearly $2 million saved, but she agonized over every withdrawal. She told me that buying plane tickets to see her grandchildren felt like she was robbing her future self. But once we set up a clear withdrawal framework, not only did she book those trips guilt free, but she felt like it was the first time that her money was actually working for her and not the other way around. I like to joke with clients that if they don't fly first class, their heirs will. But the mental burden of each spending decision can create this unnecessary stress that just undermines your overall happiness. Sometimes it feels like clients are trying to navigate a cross country road trip without a map, where every turn is intimidating, so they'd rather just sit in the parking lot, creating a retirement full of what ifs and instead missed opportunities. This constant worry about money that they're not spending creates a different type of poverty, rich on paper, but poor in experience. However, with a clear income system that I'll reference, every spending decision stops being a gamble and starts feeling more like a green light to enjoy the life you've built. Now, while the withdrawal timing anxiety creates serious spending hesitation, the longevity uncertainty introduces perhaps the most fundamental retirement fear of all. I see retirees who are so uncertain about how long they'll live that it causes frugality to take absolute priority over actually using their money. For some, planning for possibly living past their age 90 means a 30-year timeline for retirement that seems impossible to budget for. And then when you add layers like healthcare cost uncertainties, like long-term care, you've got worst-case scenarios that completely freeze decision making. And now this backfires because it creates a retirement focused more on just not running out of money than actually living well. I've seen people with $3 million saved who are afraid to spend 100 grand a year because what if I live to age 95? Meanwhile, they're missing grandchildren's early years, postponing those dream trips, and living like they're financially strapped when in reality they're in the top 5% of retirees. This scarcity thinking leads to retirement regrets that no additional years can remedy. You can always adjust your budget downward if needed, but you can't reclaim missed health, energy, or family experiences. Now that you understand these retirement fears, let me help you create a personalized strategy to overcome some of these psychological barriers. You can click the link in the description to schedule a call with me, where we can evaluate whether our services are a fit for helping you optimize your retirement plan. Now let's uncover a fear that creates analysis paralysis around one of the most important aspects of 401k usage: tax implications. What creates this confusion is the concerns around required minimum distributions and their tax impact, which leads to, unfortunately, poor planning. For those like my clients who generally have most of their retirement savings in pre tax retirement accounts like 401ks, you're sitting on what I call a ticking tax time bomb. This becomes problematic because when required minimum distributions kick in at age 73 or 75, depending on your age, you might be forced to withdraw amounts that push you from the 22 federal income tax bracket straight into the 32% income tax bracket. That means Uncle Sam is then sapping up almost a third of every dollar instead of it going into your pocket. And once you're in that higher bracket due to RMDs, you're often forced there for life. I see people so obsessed with minimizing taxes that they just sacrifice their ideal lifestyle, the very thing that they've worked toward their entire careers. I call this letting the tax tail wag the dog. Because when you have a smart tax strategy that serves your goals, taxes become just another manageable expense, not the monster under the bed that controls your every financial decision. The tax uncertainty creates serious planning complexity, but the irreversible decision fear reveals the most fundamental barrier to 401k utilization. And what drives this paralyzing belief is the perception that retirement decisions are permanent. And this creates overwhelming pressure to create the perfect choice. Something I tell clients that can sound counterintuitive is how great planning isn't about eliminating all mistakes. You'd need to predict the future perfectly to do so. What we need to do is make sure that big, potentially catastrophic events become small, manageable ones instead. Successful retirement planning isn't about hitting home runs. It's about not striking out. I've seen the perfectionism mindset backfire with clients with over six figures in savings accounts earning maybe 1%, while inflation is running over 4%, essentially guaranteeing that they lose tens of thousands of dollars in buying power each year, all because they're afraid to make any moves without perfect information. The game-changing strategy is to choose retirement decisions that we can adjust as needed. The key is identifying choices with small reversal costs so you can stay flexible rather than getting stuck. And I'll give you two examples of this. Imagine you delay harvesting capital gains consistently over time in a brokerage account, always planning to get into the 0% capital gains bracket next year. Eventually, you're going to end up with a portfolio loaded with massive unrealized gains, and then you're painted into a corner where any significant changes will surely trigger huge tax bills. You've lost all flexibility. And then from a lifestyle perspective, consider the difference between designing a retirement plan that has you stopping work 100% all at once versus a plan that allows you to scale back to part-time initially. Because if you need to, you can always take on more hours again. This flexible approach gives you options, while the all or nothing approach does not. The truth is that the cost of an action typically exceeds the cost of imperfect action in retirement planning. While you're waiting for perfect clarity, inflation is eating away at your buying power, markets are moving, and yes, tax laws are always changing. Think of retirement planning as having a GPS in your car. When you start the trip, the GPS is going to calculate the route based on the current conditions. But if there's an accident, construction, or unexpected traffic, what's it going to do? Recalculate. It doesn't shut down because the original route wasn't perfect. It then adapts. When you embrace flexibility over perfectionism, every decision becomes a stepping stone to a better retirement instead of a potential trap. But here's the beautiful thing about understanding these fears. Once you can see them clearly, they lose their power over you. What I'm about to share with you are the exact mindset shifts that have helped my most confident and happy clients turn these very same fears into stepping stones towards the retirement they actually want. And the first critical shift is adopting a retirement as a life phase perspective rather than treating it as a financial endpoint. I even had a client recently, I'll call him Richard, who is in his mid-60s, who perfectly captured this shift. He told me he was experiencing the same feeling of being on the cusp of retirement as he did when he graduated college decades earlier. that sense of the world being wide open before him. And for Richard, college graduation and retirement didn't represent finish lines. They were doors into exciting new chapters where he could dig his teeth into entirely different pursuits. And this reframing alone reduced the pressure he felt about making perfect decisions because he wasn't treating his life transition as the end, but as the beginning, reframing retirement as refirement. And now, the second crucial shift involves implementing what I call a personalized income system that creates both security and permission for enjoyment. Because instead of trying to optimize every dollar, we need to create clear frameworks that tell you exactly how much you can spend guilt free while maintaining your financial security. Why do these mindset shifts create superior retirement experiences? Because psychological readiness often proves more important to retirement satisfaction than financial readiness. Retirees who feel confident about their plan report higher satisfaction, even when they have less money than more anxious retirees with larger balances. In many client scenarios who felt similar to Richard, I get to witness firsthand how they go from overwhelmed about all the retirement decisions they need to make to finally spending time about what they actually want their retirement to look like. So, how do you actually implement a retirement approach that overcomes these psychological barriers and transforms your 401k from the museum exhibit into a tool for the life you want? First, create a written withdrawal policy statement that establishes clear guidelines for regular income. This removes the emotional burden from each spending decision. When you know exactly how much you can withdraw and under what circumstances, you eliminate the constant second guessing that creates this worry. Second, develop what I would call a 3 bucket strategy that separates short, medium, and long term funds. Your short term bucket covers 1 to 2 years of expenses in conservative funds. Your medium term bucket handles up to 6 years of income needs in moderate growth investments. And your long term bucket focuses on growth for 7 years and beyond. That way, not if, but when markets have bad years, you're drawing from buckets designed for that specific time horizon. Third, establish memory making accounts. This is where you have money specifically set aside for guilt free spending on experiences and dreams. When clients have money earmarked for travel, hobbies, or spoiling grandchildren, they give themselves permission to enjoy their wealth instead of hoarding it. Now, while I've shared is just the framework, the real breakthrough happens when it's tailored to your life, your income needs, your dreams, your family. And that's when your 401k stops being just numbers on a page, but instead fuel for the exact retirement you want. Keep in mind that regular plan reviews with specific adjustment triggers create this flexibility that eliminates irreversible decision fear. Working with a retirement focused professional provides both the accountability and what I would call permission structures, that professional validation that it's okay to spend your money on the life you planned for. The bottom line is that your 401k problems likely have nothing to do with how much you saved and everything to do with the psychological barriers preventing you from using those savings strategically. Once you address these mental obstacles with clear frameworks and systems, your retirement money becomes what it was always meant to be, a tool for creating the life you want. If you want to take the next step and create a personalized strategy that addresses the financial and psychological aspects of this transition, click the link in the description to schedule a call with me. I'll help you develop a comprehensive approach to transform your 401k from something you might be afraid to touch into something that funds your dream retirement. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.